gives an opportunity for recorded formats. We can interact, ask any questions as and when they come to your mind, and yeah, just show what's going on moving forward. So just looking at things we want to cover. So a reminder of redemption processes and timelines. There's been a couple of changes to that over the last few months, so be glad to tell you that. As I said, also, as part of that could be a potential process for wind up. We have no plans for that, but there is a process there should that happen. Where we are, current performance, current positioning. Been some good developments since our last webinar in July, which I'm happy to talk about, as well as what's going to be happening probably in the next couple of weeks, which is quite exciting. As mentioned in the July webinar, there's a potential now to borrow into Summerwood Place, and Mark as an advisor can help, talk about what situations that could be right for you and how does it affect the equity holders. And as part of that reminder of redemption process timelines, for directors, Mark's options in situations of heavy request for equity redemption or sale, as well as an IT refresher, and any other business or Q&A. So as those who are used to seeing my K Berkshire webinars will know that although I have slightly laid down a certain way, I never keep to that format. So let's instead kick off with rolling returns. So as we had at the beginning of our July webinar, we did this, and we were looking at more like 4.48% running return at that time. Glad to say, in the period since then, that annualized total returns come up to 5.76. But for the last 12 months, it's 5.3%, including capital growth. And importantly, on this line here, if I can get my pointer, there, I just draw it, is a line for including the option sale. So basically, we have completing this month is a mezzanine, so middle tranche. So if you've got your senior debt and your equity holders down the bottom, you have a mezzanine tranche of debt. As part of that, had an equity option within it. So if a business was to be bought out, you would see a degree of the capital growth in the equity as part of that loan, which is good. So that sale is happening next week, end of next week, or beginning of the week after. Can't remember quite which, but I know it's in around about 10 days. And that's going to give around about 0.5% after corporation tax lift. So I've included that in this calculation. Normally, I don't include the valuation of the options in the NAVs that I report, just because they're quite speculative. But this one, there's a firm price in place, so I am including that. So yeah, as I said, that brings total return up for 12 months up to 5.3%, which I'm quite happy with. Talking about where we are as we sit at this moment right now, you can see here on the right hand side is where we sit at this very moment. In the middle there is when we presented in July. See that the total yield has increased over 1% from where we were 9 months ago, which is fantastic. That's a combination of bringing the cash right down. As you can see there, bottom line idle cash is actually slightly negative at the moment. I dipped a little bit into my tax savings pots, to make sure that we could do a piece of lending. Obviously, that would be paid back from redemptions. And yeah, but one thing I think is quite important there is obviously when we created Summerwood Place 3.5 years ago now, obviously we were in 90% corporation tax, and the difference is, as you can see there on these two lines of different that corporation tax increase created, it's taken off around about 0.4% of yield. However, we've managed to recover all of that and some more as it stands at the moment. And we've brought that back up to, as it stands right now, 5.55%. The reason why I mention that is because if corporation tax hadn't increased, we'd be sitting at basically 6%. So we've been really quite happy with that. However, there is one rather nice loan that is developing at present, which is a van lending facility. So this is to a business that operates a quote unquote van subscription model. So what they do is so they're not aiming for people who want long-term rentals, etc. This is kind of more for your kind of like Amazon delivery drivers, etc., that do the odd bit of work but can't put together the capital for a long-term hire. So they do kind of like odd day hires, and this is like a subscription model to be able to do that. They've got a capacity problem, which is that they fully utilizing all the vans that they have very much, and so they've shown that proof of concept, and this is to expand the business out further. It's the entire facility is for £1 million, and each individual loan is obviously going to be secured by fixed charge at company's house on the chassis number and registration plate of the vans that are purchased. All the vans that are purchased on aggregate work out to be about 30% discount to the listed retail price. So that helps give us some headroom there on an LTV front, which is obviously quite important. There is a 40% bullet payment from the drawdown amount, which I quite like in some ways because it helps keep how much we've lent out high. And obviously, as those who've taken out cars, etc., on finance would be familiar with, is quite similar. That, you know, at the end you have a round about that kind of amount of the bullet payment. Each individual loan would be 4 years, and then when drawn down, the interest rate is at 16%. So obviously that's going to have a nice healthy lift up in our on our percentage return at the end. The thing that's also quite nice as well is, as is quite common with these more large business size facilities, is that there's also an interest rate to pay on the funds not drawn down, which with this is Bank of England plus half. So that would be right now 5.75% interest that they have to pay. But what we're going to do is we're going to put any funds that haven't been drawn down into money markets, which again is currently returning around about 5.5% per annum. So the two combined means that on funds that we have very little credit risk, you know, we will be earning 11% per annum on that, and that's a £1 million facility, so just over 10% of our capital at the moment. So that's going to have a nice healthy bump up onto our returns, which is wrong slide. Sorry, here we go. That's going to bring us up from 5.55% yield to a 6.2% earnings yield. So yeah, very healthy indeed. It just, again, for reference, you know, if it was under the old corporation tax regime, it would be 6.69%. So very healthy there. And our total net, the loan portfolio net return after platform fees. So those of you who have been used to Propland are more familiar with the fact that they take a 10% of the interest rate cut. As part of the fact that we're doing direct lending, obviously we don't have to give that off to other platforms. We receive that, and obviously it's for the benefit of you. So that comes out at 9.1%, which I doubt that any Propland account that's well diversified is receiving that at present. So you know, we're looking like from the next little while things are going to be getting rather healthy. The other thing as well is that obviously we're still in this rundown period from the COVID loans. Sorry, when I say COVID loans, I mean COVID era loans when interest rates were down on the floor, and there's still a few less than $1 million, but still, so circa 10% of capital that are from that period that are very low interest rates. Obviously, as we are go through this year, they're going to drop off. This is pretty much the last year, apart from maybe a few months into next year, where we'll be looking at those low interest rate environment loans still being on our books. So that's going to help lift up this naturally to higher still. So very much look forward to that, and yeah, very healthy period looking time ahead. As mentioned, you know, of this £1 million facility, it does lift it up to the 6.2% mentioned there. We are securing it against all the assets that are purchased as part of this, but also as well, it is in this, what I'm calling the dual customer agreement. So both the special purpose vehicle that is holding the vans, as well as the operating company, are both jointly and severally responsible for the term. So basically, if the SPV doesn't pay up, then the operating company has to pay up. So there is that extra good covenant going on that side of things. Just want to talk about, so going back to talking about rolling return, I said over the last 12 months, 5.3%. What's been quite interesting is seeing what other VR providers are saying in terms of, you know, bragging their returns to be. Saying like 3.3%, there is a 4.2 here, 2%. But if you take the average of these, you come out at 5.13, which compared to our last 12 months of, 3.15, which compared to our last 12 months of 5.3. Obviously, as much as we had that troublesome period around about Q2 last year of having just so much cash, it was really putting a drag on returns. Really, I think that's quite a considerable spread to comparison over the year. And as I said, we're only going to be increasing that this year in the plan. So very much looking forward to that indeed. So that's kind of what's going on operationally. But there are a few overdue loans, as people who are used to lending portfolios. There will often be a period of overdue loans, but it's very important in how they're all platform loans. I would say they're not direct. The platforms who are dealing with them are actually being very proactive indeed in how they are going about these. What they will be calling in receivers very soon after they notice that basically there isn't an exit plan from the borrower in place. And we have all of the bridging loans that this is referring to are currently in the hands of Allsop, who are a receiving company, and they are proceeding through their exit plan, whether that be auction or through a private sale. The most important of which, in terms of what we hold on our books, in terms of percentage of capital, I received an update for yesterday, and there has been an offer in place for £4 million on the property, when our exposure as a senior lender would only go up to basically 846 grand of equity. So we're kind of like sub 25% LTV on that headroom, so more than comfortable on recovery prospects for that. It's got a completion date currently that's around 6 months away, which, if I'm honest, I don't mind, because it means that it's going to be receiving default rate of interest in the meantime at 12%. So in essence, at the moment, we're receiving 12% on a loan that we have sub 25% LTV exposure, which sometimes I consider to be a good thing, not to consider ourselves too worried about overdue loans, so long as the fact that our LTV exposure to them in the first place is appropriate and we're well diversified. And of course, that's one thing that we're very keen on. You know, our exposure is well over 75 loans. I think it's 78 at the time of speaking. So we tend to try to spread that risk, of course, but yeah, overdue loans aren't necessarily a bad thing for performance. The default rate of interest can help things boost things up a little bit. Just talking a little bit about the lending that I talked about earlier. So we did take in a little bit of just checking. So we did take in a little bit of lending. Q3, we've already paid that off. There was 250 grand's worth of lending in at 5.5%. So what would happen is kind of equivalent to this column here. Forgive me, I didn't update this whole table. It takes quite a long time to update this whole table, but this gives an impression off of the figures from performance in July. What happens when you gear things at appropriate rates. So if we had geared up the portfolio up to 50% of capital, which at the moment would be about £4.6 million worth of capital being loans, the yield to shareholders does increase up to 4.83%. The important figure that the average lending rate needs to be lower at is this return after expenses. So if the lending is at less than this row here, then it works out good for shareholders. As you see, it would have been in July, but just to go back to the current situation, we're currently, here, 7.4%. So we're well in excess of that 5.5% interest rate. So it'd be a very good way to boost up equity returns. So that's important. One thing probably to add is, as Mark mentioned, is that anyone interested in converting equity to loan would need to speak to their advisors first. There may be some benefits in corporation tax, but return on loan is likely to be a little bit lower than the return on the franked dividend yield that a shareholder would get. But it's more of if you hold somewhere placed within a limited company, and you want to expense all of the income out, then there might be some situations that works out better to you. But as Mark mentioned in the public chat there, very much worthwhile in that to talk to your advisor in that situation. And also just quickly here, just talking about a quick table with regards to the different treatments. So if you hold as equity, your earnings are taxed as dividends, or a capital gains tax if there's a capital gain on the shares and selling out. Of course, we do not intend this to be the liquid vehicle, but if you do sell out, then there is that treatment. Whereas, of course, with lending, the earnings are taxed as income. With lending, obviously, the earnings on lending are fixed as per the terms of the contract. Whereas with equity, obviously, your returns can go up or down. With lending, if you lend in, you have zero voting rights, whereas you do if you're a B-class equity holder. We've done quite a few shareholder votes lately, but which is very important. We very much feel that this is your vehicle, but perhaps maybe not quite so many in the near future. Very wary of trying to get the balance between not too much having a burden for you versus given your input. Obviously, with equity investment, the tenure can be indefinite, could be infinite. But with lending, obviously, the tenure is return of the loan, although there would be the possibility of rollover there. And also, just a reminder of the redemption process and timelines. So first of all, you give Mark and myself notice that you would like to sell out. First 3 weeks is the right of first refusal to existing shareholders. So existing shareholders get notice that they could buy. So that's if you wanted to sell out, that'd be 3 weeks offer period plus the time for those parties to complete. After that, we would be going through to sell versus prospective shareholders, which is again 3 weeks plus time to complete. One thing I would say on both of those that we have changed since the end of last year as per vote is that if you wanted to sell out via any of these methods, is that your capital price would be discounted by the stamp duty, which is 0.5%. In part, that is to help incentivize prospective new shareholders to buy your shares. After all, why would someone be buying your shares if they got to pay 0.5% on top of what they would have to if they bought new shares? The other side as well is that if we do a buyback from own capital, the stamp duty ends up getting paid for by the company, and obviously that ends up disadvantaging the remaining shareholders. It's just, in my opinion, it's not fair on those who are staying around. So that's one other thing, as well as the costs of the company to go through that process are also now borne by the selling shareholder. Just helps defend the existing shareholder, sorry, the remaining shareholders. After all, they'd have to be paying for those costs out of their remaining share of the company. If there is a Summerwood purchase out of own capital, it's an indefinite time frame, though we're very much seeking to complete in 6 months. One thing that you have to bear in mind is that we have to get, if there isn't any cash around, we have to wait for loans to sell down for us to have the cash to be able to buy back the shares. And then there's a circa 6 to 8 week process after we get that, which is not dictated by us, that's Companies House and HMRC. So we very much intend in that situation to complete within 6 months. But obviously, we would like to give everyone the opportunity to do that quicker. And then this is just a reminder that directors, which as a reminder now is just Mark, options are, if there is a situation where we have a heavy period of request for equity redemption or so, is that we have the possibility to gate redemptions when that liquidity becomes unfair to the other shareholders. So what that would be is that if we ended up with redemptions of more than 10% of portfolio value, that would then, which at the moment is about 9 million, that would cause a gating situation where we'll go, okay, we're not taking any further redemption requests until we get this situation resolved, and then we can carry on normally and take these back in. As said, those kind of things can take up to anything up to 6 months. However, if we do end up gating, a continuation vote on the business would go out to voted shareholders. So if shareholders do write for cessation, we will undertake to redeem shareholders out of Summerwood Place Capital as and when loan redemptions take place. So what that means is that we would not be we would not be seeking to sell down loans early, because obviously that ends up with a forced sale, and we wouldn't be realising the best value for those loans. And interest payments will only be paid out as when the loan redeems. So basically, there wouldn't be any of the monthly dividends that take place. There would only be a dividend as and when a loan redeems, and there'd be the share buyback. As I said, majority of loans are 5 years or less. Long as there's 9 years remaining. However, I know that the borrower of that would seek to refinance that way earlier than that. But it just gives you an idea of timescales. If there was a wind-up vote that succeeded, then that'd be the timeframes I would be talking about. If there is a vote against wind-up, then as I said, Mark can decide when the redemptions can continue. Most likely because equity holders agreed a new structure in the shareholders agreement or series of meetings. As I said, we consider this very much to be your vehicle, so it's really important that we take in your views and get a consensus about how do we move business forward. However, we're not going through that process at the moment, and we don't intend to be going through that process. So one thing that very much I think to take away from where we are right now is that from July we've gone from circa 5.6, I think it was, up to 5.55% all in. Bear in mind, of course, that there is accrued interest going on top of the dividends that are received, which is quite, sorry, 4.5%, so well over a 1% increase from July, and that as and when the van loan completes, facility completes, that'll be going up to 6.2. So again, that's going to be a really healthy increase. And just as a quick comparison as to where we are right now, so we are 5.55%, but the average propellant count taken in an aggregate is, if an limited company, would be at 4.86%. So a good bit of margin there. And that's actually the best that propellant has looked on average for quite a number of years. So yeah, more than happy, of course, to send things out to Floor. Genuinely, any question is not silly. I really do value the interaction able to do, whether that be plans on do I intend to sell down any more of a loan book or anything else like that. More than happy to field those questions.